Hey Warriors of Light! It's been so long, but I'm finally back with the very last part 3 of our lore surrounding Upper La Noscea. But before I start, I really want to thank you guys for the 2K subs, and that super thanks is also now available on the videos if you want to support my work. I've also officially launched YouTube and Patreon memberships if a monthly support is something you're able to give. Details at the end of the video. And now, we're finally gonna be talking about the huge fossilized skeleton on this map. The supposed skeleton of Thalaos. Many of us have actually been misled to believe that this is a confirmed skeleton of Thalaos, one of the mythical sea serpents who was created by Llymlaen to fill and create the seas of the world. It is a weird story, but the devs do want us to believe that this skeleton kinda is and isn't Thalaos at the same time. So sit back for a ride as I show you how this tale is weaved. And also my own guess at whose skeleton these fossils really belong to at the end. And hint, it links back to 1.0. To set the context for this Thalaos but not Thalaos story, let me go back to a 1.0 story that serves as a great parallel illustration for what's happening here. For as long as men remember our own histories, we have always tried to put a name or story to things we do not quite yet understand. The citizens of Limsa Lominsa were no different. Long has it been told in myth that their patron god Llymlaen was responsible for the creation of the seas. The seas which is the source of their bounty, wealth, and power. Llymlaen created 2 sea serpents, Perykos and Thalaos. And from the mouth of both serpents flowed a never-ending fountain of water. When Llymlaen was satisfied with the seas her pet serpents had created, she apparently chained them to an island to prevent them from flooding the world. This island came to be called Swallowtail Roam, and it was also supposedly enchanted to wander the seas, such that no man could ever find these mythical beasts and abuse their powers. In the starter Limsa quest of 1.0, we are told the following story. A previously unsighted island surfaced in the south of Vilbrand, beyond the Sildales. Although the Knights of Barracuda promptly gave it the name Seal Rock, increased sightings of the sea serpent around the same time quickly brought back familiar legends of old. And soon, belief that the island was in fact the mythical Swallowtail Roam started to take root. Limsa was still very much a pirate nation in 1.0 before Merwip ascended as admiral, and many believed in the tales of treasure, power, and glory to be found there for those who are brave and smart enough to get them. The island was later revealed not to be Swallowtail Roam, but an artificial island created by the Allegan Empire to test the anti-primal weapon, Omega. But why do I tell the story? Mainly to set the context of how we do have a tendency to explain the unexplainable with the stories we currently know. And this is no different between us or the pirates of Limsa. But back to our skeleton. Similar to the story I just told, the skeleton was quickly thought to belong to that of Thalaos. In 1.0, such huge fossilized skeletons existed in La Noscea as well, and in 2 places. Both are in now-gone dungeons that were linked to Llymlaen, Cassiopeia Hollow and Shposhae. In Cassiopeia Hollow, the cave was explicitly named Thalaos and Perykos, whilst the cave in Shposhae was named the Hall of Serpents. When 2.0 was launched, it didn't take players long to notice that both these dungeons in eastern La Noscea and lower La Noscea were gone. But another huge fossil, now explicitly labeled Thalaos, has appeared in Upper La Noscea. Although the Calamity that ended 1.0 was the cataclysmic event, it was still difficult to explain how such huge fossils could have shifted, if we assume them to be the very same fossil. After all, Llymlaen only created 1 Thalaos, did she? And whatever happened to Perykos, its twin? I think it would be good to keep in mind that the maps we see in-game are also a reflection of what the people in the world came to understand these places as well. And if one were to inspect the encyclopedia wording about this area closely, it starts with, "Though there is no proof to support the claim, rumor has it that these sun-bleached remains are those of one of the legendary twin serpents unleashed by the navigator, Llymlaen." To further support that the name of the place is fueled by dominant belief, these fossils explicitly not being Thalaos was stated by the dev team in the 2015 lore panel. Behind a lot of the fantastical myths in Eorzea are merely interpretations of facts long forgotten. Here we mention how the bones in 2.0 called Thalaos are not the real Thalaos, just people using established myth to help them understand something they cannot comprehend. In 1.x, there was a cavern in La Noscea, which, if you looked at its map, you could see also contained a place name called Thalaos and Perykos. It is safe to assume that across Hydaelyn, there are probably other places that have also been named after the serpent. If I didn't know better, this is a brilliant and also socially realistic explanation that enabled the devs to keep these serpentine skeletons a feature of the La Noscea landscape. Fun fact, although it is no longer accessible today, a theory of where the entrance of Cassiopeia Hollow remains. We also do see Perykos and Thalaos very much alive and kicking in the fight against Llymlaen, where she summons them to fight by her side. And another fun fact, to know how I figured out Perykos is red and Thalaos is blue, do check out the short I've linked down below. Hint, fish lore is real, so read your fishes. Anyway, so if these fossils are not Thalaos or Perykos, then what could it possibly be? What we do know from the same lore panel, however, is that Upper La Noscea used to be located deep down beneath the sea. But tectonic activity through time had pushed the land above sea levels. And together with the draining of Bronze Lake, which I covered in the first video linked above, the fossils became exposed. So what this tells us is that, whatever a legend this skeleton was, it could be something that took its final breaths deep beneath the seas. And so I thought I was very smart in thinking about what denizen of the deep that Limsa is frequently associated with. Leviathan, of course. We also do know that through primal summoning, Leviathan can be brought back time and time again. So my initial theory was that in various parts of La Noscea, somehow laid fossilized remains of different versions of Leviathans whose bones did not rejoin back into the aether upon death. In particular, the 2.0 skeleton that we can see today in great detail resembles more closely to the 1.0 model of Leviathan that played a huge part in the starter quest of Limsa Lominsa. I was convinced of this theory because in the Battle of Silver Tier Skies, also known as Golemalt vs. Midgardsormr, the battle ended up with breaking what seems to be a seal of aether beneath the lake. This battle was depicted in full CG in the 1.0 trailer, and we can vividly see the shapes of Ifrit and Titan seemingly to have been released with this energy. It was also in the aftermath of this battle that primal summonings started to increase in Eorzea. Except that in a forum post made after the closure of 1.0, Koji Fox explicitly said no, that this creature animated so beautifully in 1.0 is not Leviathan, but a mere sea serpent. So I hoped that I could have spectacularly told you guys that the bones in Upper La Noscea today are a relic of the 1.0 design of Leviathan. But I guess it's just a sea serpent that was colossal and rare enough to appear close to mythical ranks and inspire legends of old. Well, except that 1.0 Leviathan was initially planned and completed for a release right after Ifrit, and you can hear it from Yoshida right here.
エオルゼアを維持しておくっていうことも一つのなんかこうサポートなのかなって思った機会でもありましたね、その時は。だから続けてくれてありがとうって言われたんですよ。その ファイナルファンタジー14は。開発で、あとは最も大きかったのは、実はイフリートの次に戦うボスはリヴァイアさんの予定で、リヴァイアさんをかなりの速度で作ってたんですけど、とてもじゃないけどリリースなんかできないっていう話で、だからイフリートの後モーグリが実装されているのはそれが理由ですね。急いでモーグリを作り直したというか企画し直したので。
So, considering that Koji Fox's forum post was made after 1.0 closed, who knows? This guy may or may not have been intended to be Leviathan during the time of 1.0. But it is now canon that it was just a mere sea serpent. Leviathan or not, I do think that the devs have probably gotten a kicker out of us debating whether it's Thalaos, it's Perykos, or even Bismarck. Or wrecking our brains and trying to find a sound explanation as to how these skeletons had literally moved across La Noscea maps. Since this is the last La Noscea video in which I will talk about Perykos and Thalaos, I just want to wrap up with one last fun fact. The Lominsian motto of Till Sea Swallows All is again a reference back to the Llymlaen legend we are familiar with. It speaks to the day should Perykos and Thalaos break free of their chains and endlessly flood the world with their waters. That is when the seas would truly swallow all. Knowing this story, the meaning of the Lominsian motto can thus be roughly translated as till the end of the world. To wrap up Upper La Noscea, did you know you can see two other pretty scars of the Calamity from here? Looking southeast from Cambron's Lake, you'll see the Dolomwood Shard of Wineport in eastern La Noscea, the place of the very first binding coil of Bahamut raids. And looking southwest, you'll see Fernehalwes in western La Noscea, a first of its kind lighthouse commissioned by the Maelstrom that's powered by ethereal energy. I've talked a bit about Fernehalwes, and what would the Limsa thalassocracy be without siren stories? Link in the top right above. That's it for the stories and three-part series surrounding Upper La Noscea. From the Fall of Nim in part 1 and the side quest to the Mandeville side quest in part 2, I hope you've enjoyed the stories of Upper La Noscea. For the next video, I will actually be covering the 1.0 Limsa starter quest story, since I already had to dig through and understand all the myths and legends surrounding Thalaos and the mythical Swallowtail Roam. And boy, was the 1.0 narrative confusing due to how poorly the echo was presented. In my opinion, of course. I think I've got the story all figured out, or at least you'll get my interpretation of it. So if that's something you're interested in, do subscribe, hit that bell to know when it lands, and tell fellow Warriors of Light about it. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to see more content like this, do consider supporting via YouTube or Patreon memberships that I'm very glad to have just launched. On YouTube, you'll get the seat of Azembech, which gets progressively colored with time. You'll get to influence future content on the channel in member-only polls, get your preferred name in my video credits, and also access to the written episode companions for each video. The companions will feature information I excluded or missed out in the video, alternative perspectives, memories, and oral histories contributed by other Warriors of Light in the comments. Understandably, you may not read all the comments, but I certainly do. And they have taught me so much as well. So are you convinced that the skeleton in Upper La Noscea is 1.0 Leviathan? If not, let me know what you think down below. I appreciate any level of support within your means. Like and subscribe, and membership details are down below. And may you ever walk in the beauty of Hydaelyn.